Welcome to the Cyber Insights Podcast, brought to you by the ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut. And our guest today is Mrs. Ruchi Shewaramani. We'll be talking with Ruchi about the topic, cybersecurity leadership in public health programs. Let's get into the show. Hi, everyone. This is Jim Wiggins, and welcome to the Cyber Insights podcast. Today's topic, as you heard in part of the intro, is navigating cybersecurity leadership in public health programs. We're super excited to be joined by Miss Ruchi Shewaramani, who I'm going to tell you about for a moment, just to kind of level set and provide her background. She's got 18 plus years of experience in IT. And she's got expertise in areas such as identity and access management, governance, risk, and compliance. Today, she's the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, at the Washington Health Benefits Exchange. What all that basically means is that she's got a proven record in healthcare, education, and financial sectors. I'm joined also today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut, and we'll come on in just a moment, but we just wanted to kind of set the stage for today's topic. Altan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Jim. Really excited to get into it. Very important topic and very esteemed guest that we have today. So super excited.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Ruchi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. Happy to be back again.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I thought maybe what we could do just to kind of provide some additional context and get the listeners the opportunity to learn more about you. Could you maybe provide a quick overview of your current role and the mission of the Washington Health Benefits Exchange that can, in many ways, give listeners of the show an opportunity to kind of understand where you're coming from?
Absolutely. Jim, as you said, I'm serving as the Chief Information Security Officer for Washington Health Benefit Exchange, which is the state-based marketplace for the state of Washington. And our mission is to provide secure healthcare coverage to as many Washingtonians as we can. And one of the most important aspects of my role as a CISO is to safeguard the sensitive data that our customers, the Washingtonians, have entrusted us with. And we all know it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when a cyber incident happens. So my role is also to build a cyber resilient team, cyber resilient technology, and overall cyber resilient processes in everything that we do. How we do it, I have a couple of teams that report to me. Before I get into the teams, I would also like to call out that we are not a typical state agency, which means we are not hosted, our technology stack is not hosted by the state IT in their centralized data center. And this has given us a huge opportunity to constantly modernize our IT. And as a CISO, one of the most important goals I have is to enable business and support IT by securing the modernization efforts and ensuring compliance with the key federal regulators, such as CMS and IRS, which stands for Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and the Internal Revenue Services. And how we do that to support and secure our organization's mission, like I said, I have a few teams that report to me. To ensure risk and compliance, I have a governance risk and compliance team. The main function of the team is to ensure we are constantly maintaining compliance and we are audit ready, not just leading up to the audit, but every year, not just the year leading up to audit. And the team is also responsible for assessing, managing, reporting, and tracking out the risk. Then I also have a cloud infrastructure team, which is responsible for securing the architecture efforts as we continue to modernize. And we have infrastructure across multiple cloud hosted platforms. We have SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, which is identity as a service offering, And of course, like all agencies, we are also venturing out with AI projects that we need to secure. We also are responsible for the security operations, pen testing, and incident response, the regular bread and butter of the application security teams. Last but not the least, my team is responsible for maintaining the front door, aka the access control, by which the Washingtonians can come, create their accounts or register their accounts, log in, and we implement multi-factor authentication where needed. So we also manage the front door of the helpline finder.
So, with all of that being said, Ruchi, talk to me a little bit about why you think cybersecurity leadership in the public health sphere poses unique challenges compared to other sectors. I mean, you went through a litany of different things that you have to be responsible for, but how does the healthcare sector create its own unique set of challenges? Can you talk about that for a minute?
That's a great question, Jim. And as we all have seen in the news from last year with the United Change, the healthcare attacks that happened last year, and I think the news was out recently, it's impacted more than 190 million users. So everybody is pretty well aware now of the impacts of cyber incidents and ransomware for a sector like healthcare, right? And your question is, why is it so challenging? In the healthcare sector, we have what we call the crown jewels of data. The healthcare sector has PHI in addition to the PII. So we have the health information in addition to personally identifiable information. And PHI goes for way more on the dark web than any other information. So just the ROI for the attackers in terms of the data they're going out for is way more for the healthcare. And healthcare is also one of the most impacted sectors because when a healthcare is impacted, it's directly impacting the critical need for continuity of patient care or their insurance coverages. So it has a direct impact on people's lives. So
Understood.
from data to the business impact, it's huge. And then what makes it an easy target is we have legacy systems in healthcare. The IT is fragmented. If you think of a hospital system, you know how many systems it takes when you go into a hospital, from the payments to the claims to their scans and just the medical record information. It's a huge, complicated, and fragmented IT stack that has to be secured.
Mm,
So
mm.
all of those make it a very lucrative uh, target and a very difficult target to secure.
Understood. Understood. I think Alton was going to basically pose the next question to you. Alton, go ahead.
Yes, so Ruchi, when we look at your background, you seem to have like a wealth of experience across a wide array of domains and industries, all the way from healthcare to financial services. And if we go back to the beginnings of your career, you have roots in like core computer science and IT, software engineering. I'd like you to talk through how your like, career evolved over time from those engineering roots and your transition to information security overall. Like, how did that shape your view, and how did that prepare you to the next phases of your career overall?
Absolutely, Alton. So I graduated with a bachelor's in software engineering and obviously ended up with an engineering job, which was coding and development. But that was not something I enjoyed very much. And then I moved on to pursue a master's in engineering, took a cybersecurity course, and found exactly what I was going to do for the rest of my professional life. And um, as you noted in my career, I have played pretty much all the roles that a cybersecurity department does. And one of the career experiences that I believe has most influence of how I lead as a CISO is the architecture roles. when you're an architect, you're dealing with everything from the database to the web server, app server, how you're deploying applications, how you're configuring it behind a load balancer, firewall. It basically, in addition to the engineering background, gives you a very good insight into the architecture and how to secure it. Essentially, when I look back at all these career experiences, now to me, it looks like all the small pieces that make the big puzzle come together. And now that I am in a CISO role, managing the teams that are doing the other roles across the various teams I mentioned before, I think it's really helped me understand what my teams are doing, what challenges they are facing, what they need to accomplish in terms of being successful, and how I need to interpret it and communicate it for the business. Because we know we can't do it all from security perspective. So having done it all myself, I am able to understand at a deeper level what is the MVP that we really need to accomplish in order to support our business, because there's always market to speed. There are business requirements that have to be met. So I would say having that deep background in most of these roles, especially architecture, has really helped me understand what my teams are recommending we do and what we take forward to business in terms of prioritization of the MVP to support the organization's mission, not just the cybersecurity team's mission.
So it makes a lot of sense. Being able to see the big picture, but also being able to zoom in wherever you need to get into the details. That
Exactly,
makes a lot of
because
difference.
yeah, imagine if we were to take a vulnerability and just start explaining that to the CIO or the COO, we would just lose all relevance of risk there. So having done these things myself, from the bottom up has really helped me articulate the risk more effectively and get it mitigated efficiently.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that does. It makes a lot of sense. So, kind of building on top of that, Ruchi, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that deep technical background that you came from early in your career in understanding what your teams do. How does that influence aspects of executing the strategies that you ultimately have to facilitate when it comes to being a CISO within the healthcare sector? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And at the end of the day, right, it's the mission first, is the business first, and then we secure it. If there is no business, there is no security. And I think that's one of the key challenges that CISOs face. Sometimes, if you prioritize 100% of security, 100% of the time, it's impossible to meet the business where it needs security to meet. So I would say the overall alignment of security with strategy and mission is like a balancing act, and coming down to the minimal set of requirements that you need to secure the business as well as maintain compliance. Compliance is a key portion here as well. So you find the MVP that works in order to support the mission, does not compromise the security, and keeps you in compliance.
So talk to us about the kind of regulatory frameworks that you end up having to deal with in the healthcare sector. I mean, in most cybersecurity worlds, they're thinking about things like NIST or ISO. What are the prevailing themes that, as a CISO within healthcare, you ultimately have to focus around or focus on?
I think the most important theme is the constant evolution, whether it's compliance, and we know that the compliance regulators are also becoming more stringent in terms of the implementation. The compliance requirements are becoming more stringent as well. CMS has just upgraded from Marzi to our camp. They have introduced new security controls for the HHS coalitions or the exchanges to implement. So not only is the compliance landscape getting more stringent, we also know that the cybersecurity landscape is constantly evolving. Uh, and I'm hoping we'll get to talk about the new challenges in security later on today. With AI being a key disruptor, cybersecurity landscape, threat landscape is constantly evolving. So, to bring it back to your question, the main priority for us as a cybersecurity program is to keep evolving, maturing, and prioritizing with the evolving landscape that we are in.
So I do have a quick follow-on question before I turn it over
Sure.
to Alton. You mentioned Mars E. That's not an acronym that I think a lot of cybersecurity professionals necessarily have heard of. They've heard of HIPAA, they've probably heard of 853, they've heard of FISMA. Can you spend a moment and talk about what Mars E is and how it basically is used within the healthcare sector?
Absolutely. And yep, I should have said the full form before using the acronym. So, and I talked about CMS before. CMS is Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Services. MARZ is what CMS used to call the minimum acceptable risk standards for exchanges. That was focused just on the state-based marketplaces to implement security and privacy guidelines. They have now updated or upgraded from MARZI to what they call the acceptable risk controls for the ACA, which is Affordable Care Act, Medicaid, and partner entities. So essentially, the upgraded framework of security and privacy controls has new controls, more stringent controls, and it's applicable for states who have already made strides in their healthcare transformation journeys and are now operating as health and human services coalitions. So it applies to those partner entities altogether versus the standalone exchanges. Thank you for asking, Jim.
Absolutely. Alton?
So, as you mentioned, your architectural background in terms of IT security, enterprise architecture overall. So, I wanted to set off the rest of the conversation from that point of view, at least to a certain extent, and wanted to get your thoughts on like if you were to design a benefit exchange platform from scratch today, what security principles would you absolutely want to make sure to build in from the ground up?
That's a great question, Alton. And I have a cheat sheet for that because when DC built the exchange from the ground up, I was very fortunate to be part of that initiative back in 2013. And if I have to use the very overly used term now, zero trust, you'll probably ask me follow-up questions. So I would start with zero trust, where, you know, you trust but verify. In addition, in terms of controls, CMS has done a very good job of listing out all the security controls from access control to media protection to security awareness and training. So there is already a guidebook, a rule book, or a compliance spreadsheet in terms of all the security controls that we have to implement, not just in our secure architecture, in terms of architectural things such as data should be encrypted at rest or in transit. That's also covered in those controls. So I would definitely refer to the security control guidebook or federal compliance requirement set to ensure that all those controls are implemented not just in the security architecture implementation, but also in the processes and protocols at the agency level.
It's very helpful. By the way, for the listeners who may not be familiar, CMS stands for Centers
Centers
for
for
Medicare
Medicare and
for
Medicaid Services.
Medicare and Medicaid Services. Yes, got it. So I believe security.cms.gov would be a good address for people to visit if they want to get more information on that, know
Absolutely.
what they have to offer. Awesome. So yeah, that's really phenomenal to get your perspective on that. And yeah, I'm really like glad that we can get someone who's been there, like in the trenches, implementing, and then looking back to provide their own.
Wasn't a lot of
Understanding.
fun at that time, but glad to have been in those trenches and learned from those.
That's incredibly valuable. We're super lucky to have you talk through those. Yeah. Over to you, Jim.
So, hey, Ruchi, getting back into the discussion around leadership, and you introduced previously the concept of a relatively complex environment in healthcare with all of the patient data and the PII information and all of the systems that have to be there. Can you talk a little bit about how you can navigate stakeholder environments? I mean, you've got to deal with agencies, you've got to deal with regulators, you've got to deal with all the IT teams. How do you maintain your sanity, and what's your kind of approach for how you're trying to kind of coordinate a lot of those different types of stakeholders to ultimately go back to the mission that we talked about previously? Any thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Jim. And I've been using the term MVP and the minimal set of requirements a lot in this conversation. And that's not intended to minimize the security work we do or minimize the security requirements, but it's really to provide the maximum value from the minimum work done. And essentially, where I'm going with this to answer your question is to stakeholders, the value is if we understand why they are trying to do something, and if we can explain to them why we are asking them to do it differently or to pause doing that and do something else instead. It's really the translation, the interpretation, the communication of the why, essentially the risk conversion for the different stakeholders. And the way I can explain the risk to a CIO for a modernization effort is way different than I can explain the risk, or I must explain the risk to a COO as they are looking at a call center migration. The communication to the CEO is completely different when we talk about implementing a new policy or getting a new set of federally regulated data. So they are goes back to the whole concept of why do I need something from them, explaining to them in their business terms or call center terms, IT modernization terms, and getting them on board with what we need them to do, and not expect them to do 100% because in reality that does not happen. Getting them to do the minimum with the maximum ROI.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I do want to add one more follow-on question
Sure.
as we were talking about the idea of again, a complex environment. The other area that I was curious about was incident response, right? So, how do you or how does someone in your position try to build an appropriate incident response readiness or program in a large scale healthcare environment like we talked about with all these moving pieces and all these different systems and all of these different processes? Any thoughts on kind of best practice or guidance that you've kind of run across in terms of how do you not keep yourself up at night worrying about that next ransomware attack or that next zero-day exploit or whatever's coming down the pike?
Absolutely. And I have been there where it has kept me up, and I have taken key strategic step towards not being there. So I'll hit on it in two different ways. One is I think it is extremely important for CISOs to not go down the rabbit hole of I am going to get the protective controls and the detective controls and the reactive controls. And yes, we absolutely need those. We need to make sure we have the tools, the technology, and the teams to be able to effectively detect, mitigate, and respond to a cyber incident. The second most important point that I would like to highlight is as a CISO, yes, empower the teams, have the right tool sets, but do not limit yourself to just that box. We have to think outside the box. No cyber incident can be responded to alone by the security teams. We have to lift our head out of our cybersecurity teams and start collaborating with other departments because cyber incident response and readiness needs the full spectrum of executive leadership and the full spectrum of departments in order for an agency to successfully remain operational, provide timely updates to their own staff as well as their customers, have the financial planning in place to be able to either recover from it or provide the required notifications to customers, or even invest in some third party as a forensic investigator. So, yes, keep number one, keep your cybersecurity team ready to go. Empower them to be able to successfully detect, mitigate, respond, and recover. Two, also plan heavily. This is where the exercise for the game day comes into the picture. I routinely meet with my executive leadership for cybersecurity readiness, and we invest time in doing tabletops. So we constantly learn and mature our internal efforts, not just as the security team, but as an overall agency to better prepare ourselves for the day.
So maybe I can ask the next question here. So Ruchi, you have some like real, like serious experience in identity and access management, and I wanted to get your perspective on like how do you see its strategic value or importance in terms of when we're thinking about protecting personally identifiable information and person health information on top of that, PII and PHI, and uh, in terms of like its centrality, as it's called nowadays called the new perimeter, the identity,
Mhm.
and how do you see the scalability problem being overcome without introducing too much friction in a like in an exchange environment, specifically healthcare exchange, if it makes sense in that case. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And I think you have a couple of key questions in there. If I don't address all of them, just pull me back to it. So,
Sure.
identity access management, it is, even according to the federal regulators, AC access control is the number one security control that we must implement, in addition to IA, which is identification and authentication. Um, and here is the industry phase, right? That the latest, the greatest IAM vendors use now. Hackers do not attack your system or hack into your system. Hackers log into your system. So help us protect your identity. What I'm trying to say with that is access control, identity management, password policies, all of these are essentially playing a critical role in terms of agencies like us being able to prevent uh, hackers from logging into our systems. And it also remains one of the most challenging things to do because you have your internal staff, you have contractors, we have the entire state of Washington that can come create accounts and log into our systems. We have carriers, brokers, assistants, navigators, just the number of identities and the varying degrees of identities that have access to our system, it's diverse and it's a very big number that we have to constantly manage, recertify, enforce the stringent password policies or multi-factor authentication mechanisms. So going back to your question, I see it as a key security control to be implemented and constantly updated.
I couldn't agree more overall. And also the second part, as you suggested, pulling it back, I
Yeah.
realized that there's a lot there. So in terms of like scalability and without not introducing too much friction, as you probably know better than me here. You might, when dealing with a multi-stakeholder environment with too many different perspectives and people coming from different backgrounds, how can you like consistently implement and maintain a strong IAM program in an environment that you operate in?
Thank you for pulling me back. I think that that's a not a tricky question, but a tricky answer. I look at this as a project that runs on many legs. Uh, like in terms of technology, you can scale it. Uh, Most of the tools now come with their inbuilt access controls, and I'm referring to if you look at the industry best cloud offerings. You have more stringent access control built in now than you did few years ago. So in terms of technology scalability, I think we are doing good as an industry, but the challenge is always the human aspect of it, given the nature and interoperability between various stakeholders, partners, user populations that come to the exchange, enforcing a constantly evolving and constantly stringent access control is a challenging and a slow process, because then you have to cater to each population differently and meet them where they are.
Was a tricky answer, but you managed it well, I would say.
Yes, and I'm
Pretty good
trying to
answer, yeah.
not give away too many of the details of the
Yeah,
struggles
of
we
course.
face.
Appreciate it.
So, hey, Ruchi, on that note, talking about IAM for a second, without getting into a lot of sensitive information, any thoughts on a story or some kind of experience you've had where you ran into a challenging IAM implementation and how you overcame those respective challenges? Again, try to abstract or try to, neutralize any of the identities or players involved. But can you give us just kind of a high level kind of example?
Sure, I'll give you two. The first one is, I think, a classic case of security versus business and how both have to go hand in hand. And it'll also shed some light on the previous experience of how would you build in security when you're building an exchange from the ground up. When we were doing this back in the day, 2013, from ground up, the application developers were writing code all day to bring the applications up, to make the applications work seamlessly. And then we had to build this front door in front of those applications so users could create accounts, log in, do single sign on between the multiple applications that went behind the overall platform. And you can't do those two together. The way we made progress with the IAM work is I had to wake up my team, if I recall correctly now, by 4 a.m. when the developers would stop working, is when the IAM engineers would start interacting with that code before they came back to write the code again. So it was literally building from ground up. You are producing the application code, then the IAM team comes in, plugs into it, and then the coding development happens in the morning. So that was a more of a challenge of time management and security versus business. The second one I have is more recent, and we utilized an identity as a service offering where the change management practices were not fully baked in. So we had a change pushed out to our IAM production environment without proper change management and communications, which ended up breaking something in production. So, and with this, I'm trying to highlight the change management versus the type management in the previous one. So, um, again, different flavors of challenges you face when you're implementing identity access management and doors in front of the application or the seamless single sign-on between multiple applications.
Understood. Understood. Thank you. We do now want to also talk a little bit about the future, looking into your crystal ball and providing some context about maybe forward looking insights that you might actually have. What do you think, if you had to look into your crystal ball, what kind of cybersecurity trends do you think will most impact public health programs in the short to midterm period of time coming up? Any thoughts?
Again, I think great question, and there is so much happening in the industry right now with AI, and of course, healthcare industry is not left behind. So I look at it definitely as a battleground of innovation and regulation. With AI, there are constant innovations, not just in terms of enabling business, but also in terms of disrupting businesses through AI driven or AI backed cyber attacks. AI has absolutely made it easier for attackers to create more sophisticated attacks, whether it's phishing, social engineering, autonomous malware, or even deepfake scams. Like AI has definitely enhanced the ease with which cyber criminals can cause more and more sophisticated attacks. I also see in the future, and we've already started to see this trend, is supply chain and third-party risk are intensifying. In terms of security controls or compliance, regulatory environment as well, we are looking at federal regulators now officially asking for updates on these controls, while a few years ago, these controls were not in the regulators' checklist or checkbook at that time. The one that is not going away fast enough is the legacy devices, especially in the healthcare sector. We have dealt with legacy devices as we try to mitigate the vulnerabilities on those legacy environments and or start on our modernization journeys. uh, I think it is a myth that every time we modernize, it is by default more secure than before. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, we are moving from a data center to a cloud, so now security comes with it. That's an absolute myth. So as a security professional, while I highlight the security risk or the trend of legacy systems posing a security risk, I do use that as an opportunity to highlight that modernization, which is a trend, is also continuing to pose security risk because there is no security by default or security by obscurity. We have to ensure that we are baking security into our modernization efforts. And bringing this all back to our regulation, right? I talked about our regulators being more stringent with the third party or supply chain scope. Overall, as well, I think the regulations are becoming more stringent, and the regulators are enforcing it in a more stringent way. So I definitely see security becoming more and more important, critical, and a regulatory requirement in the years to come.
Yeah. I wanted to follow up on and maybe double click on the supply chain points that you made. So, if you wanted to maybe expand on some of your concerns around in the near to long term future, some of your concerns around third party vendors and in terms of monitoring what could be done in terms of maintaining the security posture of both the organization itself and the entire supply chain that it depends on, a lot of services depend on, and how that ties back to some of the risks around concentration of vendors, like the number of vendors potentially getting smaller, but providing more and more critical services. Do you see any ties around those concerns or maybe focus areas there?
Absolutely. I think supply chain and third party are, like I said, the risk are increasing. And in the past years, we have seen more and more ransomware that is creeping through the third party vendors. Uh, I wouldn't take names in this case, but that's what I would say, that we are noticing definitely an increase in ransomware agent making lateral movement through the third party vendors, because oftentimes the third party vendors are small and might not have fully implemented or robust security practices. And the follow-up question you asked is, what can we do about it? Uh, we can't work in a silo. We have to work in an environment where there is a huge supply chain dependency. There are dependencies on third party, small and big vendors. I think it is very important to highlight where the security responsibility lies and how the security incident notification or protocols work. We can't do the security work for our vendors, but we can definitely highlight it through our agreements and procurement process as to what part of security enforcement, validation, verification, or audits lies in which party, and how they are accountable to ensure that those security requirements are being met across the different entities that are involved. And last but not the least, even when if and when they have fully implemented security best practices, we know it's not a matter of if and when. When an incident happens with a vendor, how much have we equipped them to promptly communicate it to us, and how much have we equipped ourselves in terms of our cyber resilience to be able to immediately respond to a third party ransomware or a major cyber incident, both in terms of protecting ourselves from their incident, for example, a lateral movement, or if they go out of business, how we are remaining resilient in terms of keeping our business operational and supporting our mission.
Yeah, totally. So, if you touch on the concentration point maybe a little bit. So, based on your experience, what you've seen, what you've done in your career, what do you reckon the future will look like for the vendor landscape for an organization like yours or similar ones in terms of like do you think there will be many more vendors that are specialized in certain niches, or there'll be like the opposite, like much fewer vendors trying to aggregate a lot of services and providing platforms for you to just like subscribe to?
Okay, I think
And
this was also a theme at the Gartner Security and Risk Summit today, so it's definitely doing the rounds in the industry. Uh, I There are two sides to look at it, right? One, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Two, if there are efficiencies, business efficiencies, security requirement efficiencies, as well as ROI or cost efficiencies, then it does make sense to consolidate some of the services with the same vendor. So I would say it is a good concept. We just have to navigate through it very carefully to make sure that while we are getting the ROI, we are building in more efficiencies. We are also not creating a bottleneck.
totally
So, so
awesome.
hey, Ruchi, so really interesting commentary there on the evolution of the vendor landscape. Let's bring it home for a moment. What do you think your role is going to look like in the future? If you're a CISO in a healthcare sector, does it stay the same? Does it morph into something different? What do you think that kind of looks like?
Again, I have to look at my crystal ball here. Uh, Now, I am going to take I guess, insights on how I have seen the role evolve in the last 18 years and build on it. Right? When I started, security was still something that was very much behind the IT, behind the closed doors. There wasn't that much talk about security, and there wasn't that much talk from security with the rest of the departments. Over the years, security has become more important in order for organizations to do their business and continue to do their business, given the recent increase in cyber incidents and ransomware causing outages. And security has become more visible outside of the security and IT departments. So if I have to reflect back on my role, I see myself constantly spending as much time with my team, with the security, technical work, and the compliance work, as I now see myself working with the executive leadership in ensuring that we are building in resilience not just for the cybersecurity tools and technologies, but for the overall our organization in terms of IT disaster recovery, in terms of supporting continuity of operations. So it's definitely coming out of the security box. If I was to foresee this, I would just see the CISO eventually having more and more visibility beyond the ELT. The boards have already started asking the CISOs to come and give regular briefings. I think that would become more regular and more detailed than they are as of now.
So you talked about where the CISO of the future might be spending their time. Where are they going to be spending their money? If you think about like investments that you might need to prioritize in the future, uh, what what areas do you think the CISO is going to be focused on, and how does that correlate to maybe different types of emerging threats that might actually be present? Any thoughts on that?
Again, great question. For this one, I think I'll go back to how I think as a CISO, right? You want to invest in the preventative. It's like how would you prevent yourself from getting a heart attack, right? You would eat healthy, you would go to the gym, you would do all the right things to prevent something like that happen. As a CISO, we will continue to make sure we are following zero trust. We are buying the tools and technologies to build security in, whether it's pushing security left to the CI/CD, to the development pipelines, or doing security checks before code goes into production or enterprise change requests are going in. So, yes, we will continue in our preventative health and preventative security practices. We would also continue to invest in detecting early on if there are any security incidents, from minor to major, have the appropriate incident response tools and capabilities, manage, detect, and response. Third-party services is a key one that I think is a good place for CISOs to invest in, especially in the public sector. We don't have 24/7 staff, or being a state agency, we don't have international staff that's working when the West Coast clocks out. So investing in a 24/7 third party to be able to effectively detect and respond is a core area. And then last but not the least, I would go with the assumption that yes, I can eat healthy, I can work out every day, I might still get a heart attack. Like, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I would work with not just my security team, but the whole leadership to ensure it's not just IT, it's the whole organization that is able to effectively respond. Having a retainer on file who can come in is a great financial investment where you get a pre-allocated set of hours. And You can decide whether you call them for a forensic investigation, or you might need them to work with the security team and the communications department with the chief communication officer to really build out the appropriate public relationship messages. Or if our data is on the dark web, how are we communicating about it? So essentially, to wrap it up, I would say I would focus on organizational resilience.
Thanks a lot. Altan's going to take the next question for you.
So I want to shift the topic slightly about the fraud landscape and trends in terms of like from your perspective from an information security uh, point of view. What types of fraudulent activities or attempts do you see to be the most common in an organization, like a benefit exchange? And how are some of the more effective detection and mitigation strategies evolving to keep up with that dynamic landscape?
So I want to make sure I understood you, because you're asking for what's like the
Yeah,
common theme of incidents.
some of the more like not necessarily like information security, directly technical breaches, but on the human side of security, like fraudulent activities. And then how does information security come in to like make sure that the organization is secured from both technical and organizational management point of view? Does that make sense? It's difficult if it's difficult or not applicable, you can pass. Yes.
I
Um,
wouldn't. I would try to answer this without speaking to anything that's
no, no,
specific
yeah,
to the organization.
absolutely, absolutely not. I'm
Yeah,
not asking any specific examples, but
of
in terms
course.
of trends that you see, some of like keep popping up, and if there are any like effective strategies to manage those.
Absolutely. And you hit on the human part. So I'll take that opportunity and build on it. I think phishing remains uh, a top target for most organizations. And a very important aspect of building in security and organizational resilience for cyber attacks is to ensure that we are spending time in creating education and awareness with our staff to prevent from attacks such as phishing and now deepfakes with the AI technology. So I would highlight the human aspect of empowering our users with the regular education, awareness, and also tools to continuously train them. For example, we have technology where if our staff is confused, they can click on the PAP button, the fish alert button. So when in doubt, check in with security, check in if it is a legitimate email or not, and we will respond back to you if it's safe for you or not. And we conduct regular phishing testing exercises where we would generate, we call the phishing campaigns. We will generate phishing emails for our staff, and we would do it at different severity levels based on where the staff is. And we continue to train them for a simple and the most common incident type, which is phishing.
Awesome. Also, when we think about the CISO's role, like in this context, because fraud can like range from like both technical cybersecurity aspects and attack vectors to much less technical activities. So, what would some of your recommendations be to some like to leaders across the board when it comes to collaborating with other units in an organization to make sure that cybersecurity is there and the CISO is there and they need to be in those conversations and implementing and designing controls to address some of the risks that impact both the technical side and the human side. For example, like detecting anomalous patterns, identity theft attempts, or third party uh, fraud attempts or stuff like that. I mean, just it's a very broad space, obviously,
Yeah.
but
I get it. I
yeah.
see where you're going with it. And it's a good call out because these incidents do happen, right? It's not always just technology or technical cybersecurity incidents. Incidents come to us from all different directions, in which case we partner closely with the privacy officer and the compliance officer to investigate. And assess what was compromised essentially in that case, whether it is a privacy incident, whether it's a security incident, or if if it is a violation of WABI policies or state policies, and it's a compliance violation. So it's a partnership.
Understood. Understood. Ruchi, we are running low on time. I did want to ask you about your leadership lessons learned. Can you maybe quickly summarize for us maybe your three top leadership lessons that you've kind of culminated or you've identified in your career? Maybe distill them down to maybe three core principles. What would they be?
Again, great question. I'll try to be quick with this since you said we have less time. I think my top leadership lesson as I continue to grow and mature in the cybersecurity industry is communication. I think communication internally with the technical teams and the communication to the non-technical stakeholders, explaining the why, explaining the how is extremely important. If we are not able to communicate the risk to the leaders in the language that they understand, it's safe to assume that the risk is not going to be mitigated. So the risk assessment and translation and interpretation is absolutely important in terms of the risk mitigation. And the second, I would say, uh, is to lead not just the cybersecurity team, to basically lead the cybersecurity team to provide organizational resilience, uh, to make sure we are there to support the business, whether it's a new business requirements or a new IT requirement, or to support the business and the mission of the organization when we are in a moment of an incident and responding to something that has happened. I think leading with business and operations and operational resilience in mind is very important for the CISO. Last but not the least, I would say, uh, like I said, it's important to keep going to the gym to be healthy. While we are very heavily federally mandated and we have compliance requirements, we have to treat compliance as an ongoing activity versus doing something just leading up to the day or the year of audit.
Awesome. Awesome. So I heard you say communication,
Resilience and
resilience,
continuous compliance, not
continue.
just compliance before audits.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Ruchi. Well, we are out of time. We want to thank you for coming in and sharing your expertise on the ISACA GWDC podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me here, Jim and Alton.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys and gals, that's going to do it for today's episode. We want to thank you for tuning in to the ISACA GWDC podcast. If you want to learn more about the chapter itself, you can go out to www.isaca-gwdc.org. If you want to learn more about Ruchi, you can find her on LinkedIn. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you at a future ISACA GWDC event. Thanks a lot for joining us, everybody. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you.